Welcome back to Crime Stories Now. Today, we delve into a mystifying and alarming tale from a quiet neighborhood in Florida, 2008. In the serene backdrop of a Florida suburb where the palm trees sway gently in the coastal breeze, a shocking discovery would soon disturb the peace. On a seemingly ordinary day, Rebecca Fenton found herself enveloped in a nightmare scenario. Her husband, Larry Fenton, was found dead in their home, the tranquility of their domestic life shattered in an instant. Larry was shot twice, once in the back and once in the neck, in what appeared to be a ruthless act of violence. The immediate suspicion was foul play, a suspicion that would only grow as the investigation unfolded. As the police arrived and cordoned off the scene, the quiet streets were filled with the flashing lights of patrol cars and the murmur of curious neighbors. This was just the beginning of what would become a convoluted tale of deceit and mystery. What seemed like a simple case of home intrusion soon spiraled into a complex web of deceit and mystery. Imagine finding your spouse lifeless in your own home. This was the reality for Rebecca Fenton. On a seemingly ordinary day, Rebecca came upon a horrifying sight. Her husband Larry, unresponsive and gravely injured on the floor of their house. Panic-stricken, she reached for the phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she pleaded for help. The operator received her call at 4:13 p.m., a time now etched in the annals of a quiet Florida neighborhood. Larry Fenton had been shot twice, once in the back and once in the neck. These were not random injuries, they were precise and meant to be lethal. The nature of the wounds immediately led responders to suspect foul play. As Rebecca recounted her discovery to the dispatcher, the urgency in her tone painted a vivid picture of distress and disbelief. Emergency services rushed to the scene, sirens piercing the calm afternoon air. As the sirens wailed in the distance, the seeds of doubt began to sprout among those first on the scene. Grief can often be telling. In Rebecca's case, it told a story of contradictions. As the news cameras rolled, her sorrow seemed overshadowed by a peculiar calmness. She spoke to the media with a poise that seemed at odds with the gruesome scene inside her home. Behind the scenes, detectives were piecing together a different picture. Each statement Rebecca made was laced with inconsistencies, her details slightly shifting with every telling. It wasn't just her demeanor that puzzled them, it was her ever-changing story. Her tears didn't mask the growing suspicion among investigators. Crime scenes often speak volumes. This one, however, was a puzzle. At first glance, the home of Larry and Rebecca Fenton appeared to have been the site of a vicious burglary gone awry. Drawers were pulled out, contents strewn across the floor, a clear sign of someone searching for valuables. Yet something didn't add up. The intruder, supposedly in a rush to escape after committing a murder, had inexplicably left behind items of considerable worth. High-end electronics, jewelry, and cash were conspicuously untouched. This selective mess seemed more theatrical than practical, a staged chaos meant to mislead. The question then arises, why would a genuine burglar commit such a violent act only to leave without any loot? This anomaly suggested that the ransacking was perhaps not the work of an intruder at all. The lack of theft, combined with the deliberate placement of disarray, hinted at a deeper deceit. The disorder left behind seemed staged, pointing the investigation in a new direction. When the pieces don't fit, you look again. And that's precisely what investigators did in the case of Rebecca Fenton. Initially, the focus was scattered, searching for any clue that might lead to the murderer of Larry Fenton. However, as they delved deeper, the lens of suspicion began to turn towards Rebecca herself. The discrepancies in Rebecca's account of events were subtle yet significant. She claimed to have been working out in the garage at the time of the murder, unable to hear the gunshots due to loud music. Yet how could such proximity muffle the sound of gunfire? This was just one of many questions that arose. Furthermore, her emotional response, which initially seemed genuine, began to unravel under scrutiny. Her calm demeanor post-discovery, her inconsistent grief, and her oddly timed tears during interviews did not escape the notice of the detectives. These inconsistencies were not just minor errors. They were glaring red flags. Each inconsistency added weight to a growing burden of suspicion. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, or in this case, under a car seat. In the disquieting silence of an investigation that had more twists than a mountain road, a breakthrough emerged from the shadows. Inside Rebecca Fenton's car, precisely tucked under the driver's seat, lay a chilling duo of items: a man's watch and a gun. But this was no ordinary gun. It was registered to none other than Larry Fenton, the victim himself. The presence of these items in Rebecca's vehicle was a jarring contradiction to the scene of a supposed break-in. What intruder would commit such a heinous act only to stash the murder weapon in the victim's spouse's car? The discovery was a glaring beacon of suspicion, pointing unwaveringly at Rebecca. Investigators wrestled with questions. Was the placement of these items an act of sheer panic or a calculated attempt to mislead? This evidence seemed to scream guilty, yet Rebecca's denials were equally loud. With a suspect proclaiming innocence, detectives had to dig deeper. In the case of Rebecca Fenton, the surface was just the beginning. As investigators sifted through the layers of her story, they encountered a labyrinth of potential deceit. The challenge was monumental. Rebecca's steadfast denials and the physical evidence seemed like mismatched pieces of a convoluted puzzle. Detectives needed to bridge the gap between what appeared to be cold, hard facts and her narrative. They meticulously traced her activities and interactions around the time of the murder, seeking any thread that could tie her directly to the crime. The focus sharpened on Rebecca's possible motives: financial gains, a tumultuous marriage, or perhaps an affair. Each theory was explored, dissected, and debated. The police interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances, hunting for inconsistencies in Rebecca's earlier statements, comparing them against newfound evidence. As the scrutiny intensified, so did the complexity of the investigation. The case was becoming a complex puzzle, with Rebecca at the center. Not all stories conclude with clarity. As we've journeyed through the chilling narrative of Rebecca Fenton and the unsolved mystery surrounding her husband's murder, we're reminded of the labyrinthine nature of crime investigations. The complexities began with a distressing 911 call and spiraled into a series of perplexing events and evidence that seemed to both accuse and absolve. Investigators were confronted with a scene that defied easy explanation: a home ransacked yet leaving valuables untouched, a wife's grief interspersed with puzzling calmness, and evidence that incriminated yet could not definitively prove guilt. The discovery of the murder weapon in Rebecca's car should have been the smoking gun, but instead it raised further questions. How did it end up there? Was there an unseen accomplice? Despite years of digging, the layers of this case remain partially unpeeled, and Rebecca's true involvement unclear. The Rebecca Fenton case remains a chilling reminder of how truth can sometimes be as elusive as it is disturbing.